so much. All right. Okay, well, welcome again. Let's get down to business here. Last week, a powerful wisdom teacher made her transition and moved into that realm of being absolutely everywhere all the time. I think she was anyway. But Jean Houston, some of you might know that name, contextualized our world. She contextualized contemporary thought and philosophy with brilliance and great heart. And as we are in this, we're at this nexus point right now in our history where humanity, I believe, is living with both miraculous technological advances and at the same time, we are often collapsing in apparent spiritual exhaustion. Anybody feel that? Yeah. It's just why we come together in community, so that we can remember that exhaustion is not our nature. Our true nature is God. The nature of God is that power. It is that energy. It is that magnificence. Yet it's very challenging to remember it all the time. So we hold possibility in one hand. I know we do. And in the other, I know that we also hold the hope that our fears won't determine and create our future of this country, the environment, the planet. So what we are looking for is a balance, or at least knowing that there's more in this hand than fear, that the hope is greater than the fear, and that the possibility embraces all of it, so that we can walk like this, yeah? Okay, so case in point, so I'm going to take you to a dark place just for a second, but I promise to bring you out of it, so trust me on this. On Monday, 2 teenagers walked into the Islamic Center of San Diego, and they opened fire. I know that you probably all know this. Now, 3 creations of spirit were killed. Amin Abdullah, a security guard who immediately engaged the shooters so that he could protect those inside. Mansour Kaziha, a beloved longtime 78-year-old community member. And Nader Awad, a neighbor who lived across the street, and he ran toward the danger rather than away from it. Now, the Islamic Center's leader, the imam, later called them our brothers, our martyrs, our heroes. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong. Investigators later found a document that had all sorts of anti-everything extremist material. It was left by the shooters. So hatred that broad is almost its own kind of theology. And it's a theology it's a creed that has to manufacture enemies in every direction. Now hear this, just to hold itself together. It has to manufacture enemies. It has to find fear just to hold itself together. It is that weaponizing, almost a monetizing of the other, right? The other. So that those people who believe it can keep believing it and not let anything shatter that. So this was not a random act of violence. People were targeted because where they worshiped and who they were. And I know you know all of that. So this community, the North Hollywood Oneness Center, is anchored in the belief and in the practice, the livable, active practice that God is the life in all life. All life, one power, one presence, and we are all connected in it, with it, and as it, and with each other. And not just in this room, with each other throughout life. So we cannot treat what happened at the San Diego Islamic Center as someone else's tragedy. The infinite loving intelligence that we speak of on Sunday mornings does not live exclusively in this sanctuary. It truly does not. It was present in that mosque. It was present in the security guard, who sometimes wouldn't even eat during his regular shifts because he took his responsibility to protect his community so seriously. So that's not just courage, that's consecration. That's consecration. And we honor that. I honor that deeply. This teaching of ours has to be about more than just feeling good about ourselves. knowing that we're going to have the money to do what we need to do, and finding really good parking spaces at Trader Joe's, okay? But Ernest Holmes also knew that we start with ourselves in order to create a world that works out there. We have to start with ourselves. And we carry this teaching then out into the world so that we do go way beyond parking at Trader Joe's into creating not just a life and a world that works for everyone, but an energy, a positive, creative, productive field. We live in that field, we support that field, a field of absolute knowing that we are together, we are harmonized, we are one, and everyone matters. So he knew that we start with ourselves, we carry it out into the world, not just to feel better, but to heal, to bless, and to raise each other up. So we can raise each other up in greater peace, compassion, hope, possibility, right? Religious tolerance is not a political position, it is a spiritual one. And there are times when I have heard, and I know that every minister that I know, and part of this teaching on this path, that we often hear from people saying, oh, you're getting political. I need you to know that so much of what we cherish in terms of human value, of life, of compassion, of freedom, of blessing each other, of recognizing, of supporting each other, has very much become politicized. So it will often seem that, well, there she goes, she's going to politics again. But consider this, Jesus, the teacher, was extremely political. Everything he talked about became politicized. You know, they were living in well over 600 laws that had been created just like that to govern, to control, and to monitor people's behavior and their worship and their feelings and their practices and their comings and goings. So everything he talked about essentially was political, but what he wasn't was he was not partisan. He was not partisan. So much of where we are appears to have become part of a political platform. But what we know is greater than that is the spiritual platform upon which we stand, that ground of being, which is not about political preference, it's not about political party, it's none of that. It is about a religion and a spirituality of the heart. In fact, this idea goes well beyond those walls or those imaginary boundaries between religions. It goes well beyond that into this truth that one power, one presence, one power, one presence, one power, one presence in, as, and through, surrounding each of us, never ending. And that we are here as expressions of that. And that we are called, and I believe that we are called right here today, because if you're in this room or you're hearing us on our broadcast, something got you here. Something got you here. Or somebody voluntold you. I'm not sure. But the thing is, the moment we decide that God belongs to some people and not others, we have not found God. We've built an idol. Every deep wisdom tradition holds this same uncomfortable truth. You cannot love the divine and despise its expressions. You don't get to pick and choose which temples the sacred inhabits. It's all or nothing. I go for the all. So today we grieve with that community, the Muslim community of San Diego. We support them in love. We grieve with Muslims everywhere, with Jews everywhere, with LGBTQ people everywhere, with women everywhere, with men everywhere, with children, with old, with young. Anyone who has been marginalized, attacked, or victimized, or held up as an other, we go beyond, we grieve, but we hold them in a sacred light of blessing, of compassion, of knowing that there is more here to be revealed. There is more here to be revealed. And guess who gets to reveal it? We do. So we recommit ourselves to the kind of faith that's not just about personal comfort, but the kind of faith that is active, present, and willing to stand at the gate. Willing to stand at the gate. So this woman, Jean Houston, such an amazing woman. She spent much of her life warning us in her own way that civilizations do not collapse merely because they lack technology or intelligence. They collapse because they lose access to imagination. They lose their access to imagination, to meaning, to mythic depth, to the depth of myth, of metaphor, of allegory. And they lose their access to the larger capacities of the human spirit, to believing and knowing and trusting and standing for the larger capacities of the human spirit. So the capacity to see and feel a better future and live in us was her constant urging and invitation. And she's not the only one. There are many, many. But she is someone right now who is very profoundly, at least for me, resonating with much of what I am teaching and what I am being called to invite all of us into knowing in a greater way. So she said that human beings do not awaken simply because they acquire new information. We awaken through encounter, imagination, practice. You're taking notes on this, right? Relationship, ritual. We awaken through that and through story, through embodiment, and expanded participation in life itself. That's the awakening. And by the way, that's the rising up. That's the healing. That's where we move into the actual activity of spirit as us, is by the participation in life itself. Not waiting for it to feel safe or okay, but that we actually move into it to love each other boldly, beyond our prejudices, beyond our fears, beyond the judgments we might have grown up with. That we move into that, because that is the vision that I believe we are being called to move into. She taught us that human beings live according to the realities we are capable of imagining. When imagination expands toward compassion, creativity, dignity, interconnectedness, and possibility, entirely new futures become conceivable. When we expand, a new world is possible. When we expand into imagination and possibility and, oh, I wonder what's next, futures become magnificent. They become colored with such passion, with feeling, with peace. But when imagination collapses into fear, when it collapses into domination, when it collapses into scarcity, tribalism, nihilism, we begin producing those realities outwardly. So in other words, when we collapse into the material, the fear that we don't have enough, we start to collapse. But when we expand into, if nothing else, the idea of what if there is enough? What if I am enough? What if we are enough? What if God is enough? What if spirit is enough? Whatever that name you have for that name and nature that is infinitely living through each of us, when we expand into that, we are on fire and we cannot be stopped. So I think there's a reason her work matters now as much as it ever did, because she refused to accept an impoverished view of humanity that modern culture so often tries to hand us. She refused to accept it. She refused to accept this idea of an impoverished culture. Think about that. Think about that. We are infinite. How can we feel? How can we be? How can we live? How can we perceive and move in a realm of being impoverished? The essential drama of our time, she wrote, is the awakening of humanity to herself. And that's the launching point that I want to go with today. So how do we wake up and stay awake? And where is infinite intelligence in the midst of both the love and the loss? Where is it? How do we create and live in a mental and spiritual narrative of infinite intelligence when the dominant social narrative appears to be finite, not so intelligent. And it kind of looks that way, doesn't it? It gets a lot of attention, And so here's the bigger idea here. When the world contracts, the soul expands. Think about that. When the world contracts, the soul expands. When it seems that the world has forgotten how, we will still be living the larger story, because when the world contracts, the soul expands. The soul will not be contracted by the experiences, the material, or the things that happen in the world. When the world gets smaller, we grow. When they go low, we go high, right? So that dominant narrative that wants to run through our culture is loud, it's anxious, it's shrinking. And it speaks the language of scarcity, of suspicion, and siege. Have you noticed? And so we want to ask the question, well, how do we fix this? How do we fix the world? How can I make a difference? But the real question that gives us the power, that gives us an opening into guidance, into inspiration, into possibility, and to working with other people in a community, what are the qualities of reality we are capable of imagining? And how do we begin to live into that vision? What are those qualities? What is it we want, not what we don't want? You know, it's very interesting. I work a lot with people, and I do a lot of spiritual counseling. And part of the question that gets asked early in any appointment is, well, what do you want? How do you want to feel? And most of us get to that point by describing what we don't want and how we don't want to feel. And that's a normal human thing, because we find ourselves in a life that feels like it's contracted. And the soul is expanding into a greater desire, a greater expression. It wants to invite us into recognizing something else, a new idea, a seed that's beginning to germinate within us. You know, the idea that it's gestating within this place within, this consciousness, our awareness. So how do we allow that expansion to happen? So it's normal, I believe, to say, I don't want this and I don't want to feel this way. But if we stay there, then that's what we begin to create, because there is the spiritual law that says, as we have believed, so will it be done unto us. It's that law of cause and effect. It's not to be feared, but it is to be reckoned with. Where is our dominant thought and energy going? Not in any way to bury our heads in the sand, not in any way to not look directly at whatever is happening, but then to look directly through into God, through that into spirit, through that into what's possible here. What is the ask here? What is the contraction that is going on so that something can rise up? You know, friction produces creation. Friction produces creation. We are at this point of friction because there's creation going on. Chaos is an evolutionary trigger. I know, there's a lot of trigger right now. But chaos is that which causes us to grow, to question, and to move, to swirl in that cauldron of creation to find out what the heck is happening here. So when we have pain, when we have fear, when we have all of that stuff going on, there's a greater question to be asked, which is, what is the vision that is trying to emerge? Not, how do I survive living in this hellhole? That is not the question to ask. And by the way, the other question to not ask is, why is this happening? Ask that later. Ask that later, because there is no power in that question. But the question we can ask is, what is the vision? What is the vision, and what is my part in it? What is my role in it? What am I to do in that vision? Who am I to be in that vision? That's where our power is. That's our power. So Gene Houston believed that the most revolutionary question a human being could ask is, what are we imagining? What are we imagining? You all have permission now to go back into your daydreaming selves. You might have been in first or second grade and the teacher said, oh God, there they go again. Imagine, they're just off in the cloud. I want you in those clouds of imagination. We have to be, because that's our connection with spirit. Imagination is not decoration. Now hear this, it's the architecture of the future. Imagination is not decoration, and it's not a luxury. It is the architecture of the future. When the world contracts, the soul expands. So when imagination collapses, and this is really tempting, when it contracts into fear or scarcity, societies don't just describe those realities and narrate them, they reproduce them. And I've seen that in my own life. When I fall into a place of fear, of great judgment and suspicion, and it's easy to do. Anybody watch the news lately? But if I stay there, that's the future I'm participating in. And I'm not here for that. I'm not here for that. It's not merely a sociological observation. It's a spiritual diagnosis, guys. Spiritual diagnosis. In religious science terms, what we teach here in New Thought, we would say that the collective mental equivalent has shifted. Now, Ernest Holmes taught, and he was the founder of this teaching, that mind is the medium through which all things are created. And if the dominant thought form is not enough, not safe, not possible, then what gets built, what gets created in the outer world is a mirror of that interior architecture. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So lest you think that we have to generate the escape from that narrative, generate the escape or getting out of that mindset that is just so seductive and so familiar. Therefore, we kind of think it's comfortable, even if it's really, really uncomfortable. But this is the thing. We don't have to self-generate the wisdom, the inspiration, and the right and perfect guidance to live and move through this world of conflicting narratives and beliefs. Because Ernest Holmes also said this. You have a silent partner within you whose energy is inexhaustible and whose intelligence is without limit. That which is within you is greater than that which is in the world. You have a silent partner within you. So, when the world contracts and the soul expands, how can soul expansion actually save us and pull us into that vision, to put us in a place of hope, of joy, beyond just an hour in here? Not beyond just an hour in here, but moving out into the world so that we have tools to be able to live in the world. So the question that I want everyone to ask is, what is your narrative? What is the story that you are believing and living? And tell it. Here's the assignment. Look at the story that you are telling. Go to all the mud, the darkness, and the silliness, and the whatever, judgment, and evil, and hate that you can. Get it out of your system for one last indulgent time. Go there. Make it big. Make it beautiful. Then look at everything that's there that you don't want. Tear up that old one. Burn it. And then, now that you've honored it, now that you've honored the fear, now that you've honored the ego, now that you've honored all of that stuff, and maybe the story, the architecture that was given you by someone else in your life, because most of those narratives were given us by someone else. Now, a clean slate. Who are you? What is the world in which you want to live? How do you want to feel? What is the beauty that touches your heart every day? What is the miracle that the song of a robin in the tree begins to dance within your heart when you hear the music of a bird or you see a child laughing? What is that thing? How do you want to feel? And with as much emotion and dread that you painted the picture over here, now, over here, this is the gold. This is where the treasure lies. You know, we turn our thoughts away from this to this. Emmett Fox taught an idea called the golden key. And that golden key is that we recognize, but then we turn to the truth of what it is that we know. The truth is God. What are the qualities of God? It is that joy. It is that limitless possibility. It is that intelligence that is always, always striving to create harmony and balance and greater expression, that has created the planets in their orbits and keeps them there, the oceans that rise and fall, the sun and its beauty and its majesty, the moon, all of that. That is who and what we are. We're not this over here. That's a fact. That's somebody else's thinking. That's our thinking. But now, let's take that, look at it for what it is. Ooh, I created that. Okay, I'm done. Come over here. What do I want to create? What is the vision I want to live into? Who am I? And what reality am I actually capable of imagining? What we really need to get is the infinite is not the problem. God is not the problem. Our perception of all of it and our refusal to set it down, that's where we run into problems, because we are energizing with our attention. We are paying so much attention. And again, we look at it and then we look through it. Television and then spiritual vision. Television, spiritual vision. Spiritual vision cuts through. Whose imagination actually built the house of beliefs and limitations in which I'm living? And is this the house I want? So somebody might have given it to you. And it's okay to be disloyal to them and to no longer live in that house of ideas. You know, many of us think that if we are different than our parents, if we earn more money than them, if we're happier than they are, if we have more peace, if we're more positive, if we are more gloriously humorous and whole and healthy, that we are being disloyal. Please be disloyal. Please let that go. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote in The Oversoul, "Within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. That one is already within you." What Jean Houston said was, we all have the extraordinary coded within us, waiting to be released. What are we waiting for? Do you need permission? No. Because if you do, you have it. I give you permission. We all have the extraordinary within us waiting. We are coded for this. It is waiting to be released. It is waiting to be celebrated. It is waiting to be recognized. To listen to that voice that is saying, I'm frustrated here, I'm frustrated, turn it over. I have a dream. That friction means that the dream is coming forth. That dream is there and it wants to come forth. There is a different, uniquely deep, personal, and original story within you and within me, and that is the extraordinary code within us. That's what we need to uncover, excavate. And there's a great and powerful energy that can run through all of this. And we don't often talk about it because here in this thinking, we tend to be very rational, very intelligent beings. But the word is hope. The energy is hope. And it is in the very fabric, I believe, of our humanity. Now, hope is not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. It is not optimism. Optimism is a personality trait. But hope is a practice of your imagination. Hope is a practice of the imagination. And it's exactly what Jean Houston meant when she said, human beings live according to the realities they are capable of imagining. Hope is the act of keeping the imagination open when everything in the culture is trying to close it. Václav Havel said this, hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. Whoa! There's something beyond all of this. There's something beyond all of this. We can hold hope without being naive about what we're watching in the world. And that's because the vision we hold for ourselves and for each other is as spiritually powerful as any vision anywhere held by anyone. In fact, the vision I can hold for you is as powerful spiritually as the vision I hold for myself. So awakening is not something that we do as a solo project. It happens in encounter, in relationship, in community. It's in the quality of how we actually see each other. So again, this idea that chaos always precedes transformation. Barbara Marx Hubbard also said that conscious evolution is inherently social. You can't evolve into your full humanity in isolation because the full human being is a relational being. This is why we come together in community with all of our warts and all. We don't come in here to be perfect. We come in here to be perfected, to be grown, to recognize that friction is actually polishing us. And that it's good, it's really good. And we only see that with each other. We only get to heal that with each other. So, in our families, in our friendships, and in this room, we are constantly doing one of two things. We are either expanding or contracting our collective and community imagination of what's possible. So, that's not just abstract theology. That's tomorrow morning at the breakfast table. The way you hold your partner in your mind as being fixed in their limitations. Oh, that's just how he is. Or as genuinely capable of becoming. That's a spiritual act with consequences. That's a spiritual practice. And not, I want him to become this way. He needs to do this, 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 and this. And we'll check it off as he gets there. No. It's the high and holy vision we hold for each other as unfolding, as limitless beings, as creative, as worthy. So, the world doesn't need our anxiety, it needs our expanded imagination. There's a lot of anxiety in the bank. We don't need to make any more withdrawals there, right? And so crisis is an evolutionary driver. Crisis is the evolutionary driver. In other words, it's precisely when the old story becomes untenable that humanity becomes most available to a genuinely new one. Congratulations, we're there. The old story isn't working. Listen, what we're witnessing right now is not the triumph of finite intelligence. It's the death rattle of an imagination that has run out of road. The dinosaurs are dying. The old paradigm cannot be sustained by any form of life support. What we are seeing is the transformation, and yes, we are in the crisis, we are in the chaos. Congratulations, we can handle it because we've got each other. And we've got each other visualizing and knowing for each other that we are more than what's going on. In other words, we are the ones we have been waiting for. Anybody hear that one before? Ernest Holmes wrote that evolution is eternally going on. We are in the midst of it, we're a part of it, and there's nothing to be afraid of. So let me just share some wisdom with you. We are at an extraordinary juncture in history. We are being asked for the first time to become conscious participants in our own evolution. Wow, that's a place of power, that's a place of choice, that's a place of agency, that's a place of incredible imagination and creativity, and it's you and me. It's you and me. It's not someone out there. It's us, because we're awake. And we choose to be awake to it. We choose to live from that. We choose to know that and to call it forth as the greater truth in which we are going to participate and continually evolve. You know, I shared this quote a couple of weeks ago from Myrtle Fillmore, who was the co-founder of Unity, and she said, "You have it within you to do all that you need to do. Get at it." Get at it. And let's get at it now. You know, Emerson wrote that the rushing stream will not stop to be observed. The infinite doesn't pause for the news cycle. It keeps moving through every person in this room out into a world that needs exactly what we carry. So will we be defined by an old limiting narrative? Are we going to be defined, or will we be divined by a new story of imagination, of hope, compassion, of tolerance, of peace, of all of those qualities of God? See, and that's where hope comes in, not as a feeling we manufacture, but as the decision we make about what we believe that the infinite is capable of doing through us, starting with the person sitting closest to us. Will we be defined by the world, or will we be divined by soul? Will we be defined by limitation and fear, or will we be divined by the truth that is already innately there within us? So here's your homework. This is a radical call to action. I want you to choose one person, family member, a stranger, a friend, someone in the news, someone sitting within 10 feet of you now, and spend this week holding a larger vision for them than they are currently holding for themselves. If you've got teenagers, you know exactly what to do. And not with pity, not with unsolicited advice, definitely not with the kind of smugness that people, that makes them want to slap you. I know what you need. No, you don't. Just hold a larger vision. Hold it silently, consistently, and in quietness and confidence. Hold the larger vision for that person. You know, Jean Houston said this was called midwifing the possible in another human being. Wow. We get to midwife what's possible in each other. That's a pretty great place to be. Yes. That's it's a place of trust. The divine has placed that trust and that capacity within us. Ernest Holmes called it knowing the truth about them. Barbara Marx Hubbard said she called it recognizing the evolving God in your neighbor. We have a lot of evolving God going on in the people in the world. Have you noticed? Whatever we call it, it is one of the most radical actions that you and I can do in a world that is so completely in flux. It's all fluxed up. So this week, unflux your world, and maybe you will just unflux the world of someone else, and someone else, and someone else. Let's pray. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I invite you to just simply breathe and turn within, going beyond the flux, and moving into the deep awareness and imagination within, which is saying, "Oh, my beloved, thank you for finally hearing me. Thank you for standing in the truth that right where you are, anything and everything is possible, because what is within us is greater than that which is in the world. So I recognize that I am one with this, that we are one with this, that we indeed are the ones we've been waiting for. And so we choose now to recognize and to continue to recognize, to know and to know and to know a higher vision for ourselves, for the people around us, for people on this planet, for the entire world. That when two or more hold this vision, there is a light that shines and things dissolve, they move, and shift takes place. We are witness to the glorious shift of humanity. We are midwifing the glorious shift of humanity. And birth is messy. We honor that midwifing, and we bring a lot of towels to clean up the mess because we are midwifing the possible. How glorious it is that we have said yes to this assignment, whether consciously or unconsciously. We are here to do that. So I bless this community, I bless this church, I bless all churches, all paths to God, all mosques, all temples, all ashrams, all synagogues, all cathedrals, wherever people gather to shine a greater light of peace, of understanding. And I know that we each now commit to holding that greater vision and doing all that we are called to do to shine that light. I am so grateful. I am so grateful. And in that sense of great acceptance and gratitude, I simply release this word into the law of mind, knowing that these words do not return unto us void, that they actually are working now. And the revelation, the realization of the great presence and power of Spirit is here and now. And so it is. And I invite you to say amen.